I like to address this question in two parts because I really think there are two questions, Tim. One is how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And then that imposter syndrome manifested even more so when you try to get into a popular role like product management, which is the second part of the question.
But, I think, Shyvee, you brought up something interesting that I feel like, maybe we can expand on because you referenced like imposter syndrome and not really feeling like, I don't know, like, and I want to take this a little bit from the angle of breaking into product management because I think this is a unique just topic in itself because it's not truly something that you're going to just, study a core like product management throughout your undergrad and know exactly like, oh, I'm going to get into product management straight out of school. Oftentimes that's rare. There's sometimes associate PM positions and things of that nature, but oftentimes, you'll go on Reddit and there's hundreds of subreddits talking about, what are my, I come from an MBA background or I'm a consultant or, what are my best chances of getting into a product position? And I think that leads down this imposter syndrome that you were referencing of, I don't know if I was, meant to be in this seat or not, because I still have so much I need to learn. And, Lauren, you hit it on the head with, your experience at Huddle, like finding a company that gives you that opportunity to kind of spread your wings. But what would you say gives folks like their best advantage to getting into a product seat, if they're looking at their background and, what they might want to consider when trying to present that to, a hiring manager when they're, trying to obtain that role. That's a little bit vague, but yeah, I'd love to just kind of like get into that weeds of some of that.
I want to take the first stab at this one because I have a funny anecdote from my past. I spent 10 years working in sports tech and it was the same thing. Everyone wanted a job in sports. Not everyone, but it was like, I'd go to a career panel and people would be like, how do you get a job in sports? I love sports. I'm so passionate about sports. In interviews for my companies, I'd be interviewing people. Well, I'm really qualified because I love sports. And it used to occur to me, and I like to use this analogy for product management because it was like, that's not a qualification. Like really wanting to, like, I think the parallel for product management is like, I have really good ideas. Or like, I feel like really close to the customer. And I think I have the ideas that it would take to build a product roadmap to solve those problems. And the reason I like the sports analogy is because I used to bring it back to, okay, sports, it's a field. Like what you have to know the value and the outcomes you're going to contribute to. Like what is the outcome that you're going to drive that you're going to add value to within that sports organization? And I used to give that as advice to people who want to get into sports. It's like, okay, what is the business outcome you're going to drive? How are you uniquely positioned to solve it? That's more of like an interview advice. But within product, if you're trying to break in, think about what outcomes you've already driven. Do you have a track record of understanding the system beyond your role, of how it all comes together, about driving outcomes within that system, of driving alignment, about identifying a problem, testing and learning whether it's wrong, evaluating alternatives, seeing where your assumptions are, getting it to all the way through to user value. And, you can do that within a customer success role. You can do that within a business development role. You can do that in a marketing role. You can go and volunteer for things outside the scope of your role and be really outcome focused. And in a product management interview, or even within your company, you're going to get that track record of being like, I produce outcomes, because that's what matters as a product manager. And so if you understand what outcomes you're going to drive for both the customer and the business and can speak to them, and you're always having that mentality, that's going to be more valuable for getting into product management than any idea you could cite as why your ideas are going to be better than someone else's. So I'm curious to hear what you think, Shyvee.
Yeah, Lauren, I love what you said. I like to address this question in two parts because I really think there are two questions, Tim. One is how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And then that imposter syndrome manifested even more so when you try to get into a popular role like product management, which is the second part of the question. I think the first part about imposter syndrome, it's so funny because I read a book that I recommend folks to check out. It's called Positive Intelligence. There's 10 different sabotagers for yourself that manifested in different ways to try to like judge you or stop you from, doing more, playing bigger, and living a more purposeful or productive or fruitful life, right? And those are the 10 different type of voice that could tell you like you're not qualified for this role or you're not good enough or this and that. It's judging you for what you did. And actually, there's a lot of science about it. I'm not going to go into the detail, but the gist is that since hunter-gatherer days, like our mindset, our brain is wired to protect us. So anytime we try anything that's remotely hard or unfamiliar, you're going to hear that voice. It just sings different tones and narrative, right? And we don't know that it's imposter syndrome in the beginning. Like I didn't know, but you're just going to hear a voice and say, oh, maybe I wouldn't be good for it. Maybe maybe someone else is better. Just because you're trying something new. And you need to get familiar, insanely familiar with that voice. Because anytime you're going to do something hard, anything that's eventually meaningful, that you're growing, you're going to hear that voice. And so I think the trick to overcome imposter syndrome is not to be afraid of it, not to think of it like something you can overcome once, and then that would be it. I think it's something you had to like constantly deal with. Unless you stop trying, you live in a very comfortable, easy life that you might regret like a couple years down the road and then start over again and then feeling that. So I think you need to learn how to embrace it and get familiar with like what negative chatter is singing to you so that you knew, okay, you can catch it and then you can then reframe it and then be able to cope with it better. And now to your second question about breaking into PM, I think Laura mentioned such an important point. I feel like a lot of folks wanted to break into product, but they are approaching it from their own angle of like, oh, I'm a customer support manager. How do I break in? Or I was a consultant. How do I break in? I think you need to embrace that new identity. Again, imposter syndrome will show up, but how can you explain your current job from the lens of a product manager, right? Like, how are you able to drive value? What impact did you deliver? What problem did you solve? How did you decide what problem to solve? Did you talk to the user? How do you get their insight? How do you prioritize what they say and translate it into a product roadmap? I think a lot of it is embracing this new identity of like, I'm already acting as a product manager in my current role, in my current capacity. And how do I tell a better story to reflect that? I think that's one. I also think that the other one is a lot of times people think of they're going to get their dream product job in one go. I think in current, market dynamics, sometimes it's hard. So I encourage people to embrace a multiple step phase approach and also be open-minded to different types of company. I know that for bigger companies like the FANG company, LinkedIn included, sometimes they're very strict about a certain, you have to be a product manager before you can apply for a product role. That catch-22. I encourage people to open up to startups or other company that are more welcoming to career pivoters who can bring a different skill set to the table. So don't pigeonholing yourself just into maybe one type of company or one stage of company. And you can always, try something else first, get that product title, and then apply for maybe more mature company that have like higher threshold for former years of product experience. And then you're going to shape your path, once you're in the field and learning on the job. So stay open-minded. I think it's my other tip.